Okay, apparently we are starting on time. I realize that I'm standing between drinks and a good time kind of thing. So I appreciate you guys coming in, and hopefully we are going to have an interesting session together. My name is Uli Hohmann. I'm the Chief Architect for the Worldwide Enterprise Services Organization inside Microsoft, which is really the consulting organization. And I will talk you through a number of things we as a services organization are doing to help bring applications that run in data centers into a private cloud environment. Because as you most likely will know, most of the applications that you can get by today that you run inside an enterprise data center don't know anything about private cloud, and they won't know for quite some time because the application code is old or is too complicated to shift in one release. And you kind of see that with Microsoft's lead applications as well. SharePoint Exchange, Link, SQL Server, none of these guys know anything about elasticity, resource pooling, any of the concepts that we throw around inside the data center, private cloud and so forth, happily and heavily. And while we cannot, as services, change the application architecture of a thing like SharePoint, we are providing a number of things that we will share in one way or the other with a broader community to integrate those applications as best as possible in the constraints that they have into a private cloud environment. So this is what this talk is about. Where do we come from? How does this work? And how does it look like? And I hope that we'll have a chance to have a dialogue about what's needed and how you guys are looking at this as well, because I certainly am very interested. What is the problem? First of all, the private cloud community and the private cloud attributes are derived from public cloud attributes. And when you look at Windows Azure Platform as a Service, it says you rewrite your app so that it works with Platform as a Service, and then I do all these things for you. I will be elastic, I will be self-serving, I will be all these things. And then we said, that's a really awesome thing, let's put this into our data centers. So that's one dimension of the problem. The second dimension of the problem is this one. When you look at any product that you buy, it doesn't matter if it's a Microsoft server product or if it's an Oracle server or anything you buy, you have to start to figure out, how do I get this thing deployed? Do I configure? Do I customize? To what degree do I configure? To what degree do I customize? And you buy yourself know-how, or you read. I heard from one customer that they actually go to MSDN, TechEd, and they also Google all sorts of stuff. They print things, and then they sift through what is the guidance that various people provide. And sometimes they find conflicting guidance that says, wait a second, you should be doing this. No, wait, that, and so forth. So there's a lot of complexity when you think about how do you get a server product into a data center, private cloud or not to a degree, and really run it. Then you need to integrate it. You integrate it into your application environment because generally things like SharePoint, SAP, Oracle don't stand on their own, so they have to be integrated, but they also have to integrate into the management environment. And the only thing that we have done so far as a company is pushing management packs as a requirement. So when you look at the common engineering criteria for Windows Server and all products that run on Windows Server, the only management artifact that's required is a management pack. That's it. Nothing else has been defined, nothing else is being described. So at this point in time, we can monitor, but what you do after that, that's your problem. And there is no standardization at this point in time of how that works. Then, of course, you have to keep it running. You have to administrator it, you have to patch it, manage it, and monitor it, and so forth. And then you have to use it well. So deploy and use the features of the product that you purchased, and so forth. And do that for all applications you deploy. Every single one of them. Because there's not a single guidance at this point in time of how to do that. So now I've depressed you, I guess, or I've just reflected reality back to you and saying, yeah, that's what I do every day. What do you talk about? And how are you going to make my life easier and more happy, ideally, based upon some of the investments we are seeing? The good news is the problem is understood. The public cloud is driving a lot of pain into operators and hosters, like Microsoft. We're operating our own software. So we're kind of realizing a lot of the pains that you had to go through when you buy and purchase and deploy these things. So you see a lot of improvement in all of the application products. You see improvement in the Windows Server and System Center environment. And this talk is about how do you connect those. Today with manual methods to a degree, and tomorrow hopefully based upon being part of the product. So what I described to you already is that this private cloud world, which we all admire and aspire to, at least I've yet to see a single customer around the globe that doesn't want to go there for their data center environment. And these applications, let's just pick the Microsoft Productivity Stack as an example. There is something missing. Something missing in two dimensions. One, try and find the guidance, and no offense, Tom, that says, what is the prescriptive guidance, what you have to do if you're a software vendor to integrate into the Microsoft Private Cloud? They talk a lot about these attributes, and then they say System Center. And then they leave you alone. They're kind of saying, okay, I'm done. Which means that, of course, if you're a good ISV, you will use the products and so forth, but you will use it in different ways because lots of flexibility. And so part of what we're doing is looking at ways of prescribing an architecture that puts these products onto the private cloud. It integrates into the systems management environment as prescriptively as possible. Again, I've walked you through this already, but it's worth rubbing it in to a degree. Mixed guidance. There's really a lot of variation on guidance out there, and you have to sift through what you like or what you don't like, which leads to thousands or millions of variations. I would currently say that every deployment of every product, at least for Microsoft products, but I also know SAP and others, is unique. It's unique configured, it's unique described, and so forth, because somebody will do a twist somewhere. Islands of best practice depends on who you get. If you have a very strong SQL Server person, they will give you this guidance. If this person is more of a SharePoint person, they will give you this guidance, although you need SQL and SharePoint together. It takes a long time. And to a degree, it is unproductive time for you because you can't use the product. And of course, we also have the aspiration, at least at Microsoft, to help you utilize the investments we're making in the public cloud with your private cloud environment. So the session before me was talking about hybrid clouds. Hybrid clouds is something that we will see for a long, long time because I've yet to see a single customer that wants to go all public cloud. But I also don't see most customers excluding public cloud from their environment either. So combining those two is important. And while that often happens on virtual machine layers or virtual private networks, it actually is more interesting to think about SharePoint or Exchange or Link scenarios in this hybrid cloud environment than in the lower level infrastructure. It's just cheaper and more flexible to do. But in order to do that, you have to have some guidance that allows you to get there. The way I describe data center IT is actually a restaurant analogy. If you think about a fridge, and we invite each other to dinner, we effectively invite you to go into the fridge and pick whatever you want, and however you would like it, and then we prepare it. And that's really the way we do data center stuff in most cases. Not necessarily everywhere, but it's certainly one of those. And that means variation everywhere, complexity everywhere, and so forth. And we used to do the same thing with a very expensive thing, a data center. Any of you having ever built a data center? Yep, Kyle has built one. Think about these things, especially when you look at Microsoft's data center size. $1 billion in capital spending is easy. 1 billion with a B. So quite a lot of money is being spent there. And to a degree, in the old days, quote unquote, everything was custom and everything was custom built. Every data center that was built was absolutely unique. It was a single installment of a data center. And when you see single installments, generally you also see a lot of price tags increasing. And there's lots of vendors who do special things for you. And we built the first Microsoft data centers for Windows Live, what it was then called, this way. And we thought we did great. Now we have changed our mind and our approach completely. So we actually do not ask for specialized things anymore. What we're doing is we're standardizing the environment entirely. We're doing what's so nicely called extreme standardization. And not only do we standardize in terms of what servers are we going to buy and what network and so forth, we are also standardizing on building effectively sheds where we put containers into the racks, into the sheds. And the containers are standard HVAC units. They're not custom. You can buy them as normal pieces. Why they are HVAC units? When they're HVAC, you can put them on the roof, for example, if that's a deployment model you would like to entertain. If they are containers, in terms of shipping containers, they underlie some regulation that you can't put them on roofs, for example, if that would be a sensible thing. But the important piece is that we pre-manufacture and we use the supply chain standardized to really build this stuff. Now you're kind of saying, wait a second, we talked about data center applications and he's now talking about data centers. The reason why I'm driving this analogy is when you go back to the old days, everything was hand-planned, everything was hand-done for this one instance of a data center. And if you only build one or two in your lifetime, that's okay, maybe. It's still expensive, but it's certainly okay. Now, in this new world, we actually are building and continuously growing the data center capacity, and so we have to figure out a way to stamp these things out fast and cheaply and standardized so that the operators, the people that are running the data centers and maintaining them don't have to think, ooh, I'm in Dublin, Ireland, this is the way it works, or I'm in Quincy, Washington, this is the way it works, or I'm in Boynton, Virginia, and it works completely different. The goal is that you can ship a person into any location and they know what to do. The supportability framework, variability, and so forth has been reduced to an instance of one, ideal case. I'm sure there will be some variations because somebody's always special, but the idea is to not allow variation. And from a data center deployment perspective, that's also what you want to achieve. The bane of IT has been that we always say, yes, it's just software. Don't worry about it. And the good news that the cloud is bringing us is they gave us argumentation of saying no. And the no is effectively economic reality, meaning how do you deal with people that want all sorts of features? You put a price tag next to it. And if you bring a price tag next to it that can't be confirmed outside of your own sources, that's tough. But I'm sure some of you guys know that your procurement guys or your business guys are looking at your VM prices for private clouds and saying, wait a second, why is your VM so much more expensive than an Amazon or Azure VM? And that trend will continue. And so while could be negative, it is also positive because you can now put transparent pricing onto services, and anybody who wants a green egg rather than the yellow egg that you have will have to pay for that difference. And again, sometimes useful. So what we are trying to get done is predictability and simplicity from extreme standardization. How extreme you can go depends on you to a degree, but it's really important to say no is a capability that we have to build up. And IT has been very, very reluctant to do that because sometimes we feel under pressure that we have to be loved or have no idea what the attributes are that you are interested in. But it's certainly something where cloud computing says, no, this is the way it is, and here's the benefits of doing it. And then you can opt out, fair enough, but at least you're getting something that's very well defined at a given price point. And that price point keeps coming down. So this morning, we announced some new pricing schemes where we do now pricing by the minute. Good old mainframes are back, I guess. So from that perspective, expect more things, price pressure coming onto private cloud as well. So standardization is the number one element in this game. So if you think that you can deploy data center workloads, whatever they are, without having a standardized plan in place, it's going to be very hard because then you still are in unique instance mode. Gartner and some other analysts are talking about the industrialized delivery or industrialized services revolution. So we're trying to figure out a way to deploy things automatically, manage them, and really look at a services capability that has to fulfill a number of criteria. We believe that a lot of data center deployments will go standardized by sometime in the future. I've seen a lot of customers saying to me, yeah, Uli, what you're talking about, and I will talk about it, is not something that I can adopt today as is, but it's 80% of what I need. And I don't have to sift through 9,000 pages of documentation and figure out what is right and what is wrong. So there are a couple of benefits that even if you can't take the whole thing, whatever that thing might look like, you will get benefits by simply grabbing elements of it and customize from there. So what are we trying to get done? Decrease time to value. We don't want you to spend time with us. I mean, I make a great business, customize SharePoint design, infrastructure, Exchange, and so forth for you. I do a great number of business opportunities, and I will continue to do so for a certain set of cases. Even if it's not Microsoft services that you employ, you use an SI to do similar things. And what we are wanting to achieve is don't worry about the infrastructure too much. Figure out a way how to use the application. If it's SharePoint, you have e-discovery, team collaboration, my sites, social, search, blah, a lot of stuff that you can use, but you are worrying a lot about the deployment architecture, the management architecture, disaster recovery, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so what we are really trying to figure out is how do we get you to a rationalized architecture foundation? Rationalized in the sense of our I/O maturity model. I don't know if we even talk much about them anymore. Basic, standardized, rationalized, dynamic. And so what we're trying to give you is a rationalized architecture based upon Windows Server and the rest of the foundation. Capabilities to drive predictable and mature services. So with a tunable configuration, not completely hardwired. So we're not going to talk about reference architecture. We're going to talk about a variable reference architecture. And then realize value in the cloud through elasticity and self-service as much as the application supports it. And really look at how do you use techniques that the cloud provides to drive automated deployment and scale. Again, Exchange will be very, very unhappy if you take servers away from it. Trust me, or SharePoint, or SAP, or Oracle, it doesn't really matter. At this point in time, they all go, these are my resources, keep them for me. And they effectively expect to manage those resources. And again, focus on operations. Because at the end of the day, if you look at the cloud game, forget the elasticity for a second, the cloud game is all about taking the human operator out. If you look at a service like Bing, Bing runs on 350,000 servers, something like that. So it's a huge thing. If there is one operator that has to get involved, it's a very bad day for the Bing guys. And they're really trying to remove the operator as much as possible. So that's the one extreme. Are we going to be able to get there? Not in V1, because the systems are not built that way. They were built with, hey, it's okay to call Fred. But we're trying to call Fred only when it's necessary, and that's really where we're going. So how do we do this now? Microsoft Services has invested in two things, or three things, and we're calling it the industrialized delivery model. The first set of things is a PLA. A PLA stands for product line architecture. If you follow some of the older SOA models, IBM talked a while about it, we talked about a while about it. It's effectively a variable reference architecture that depends on your configuration what the exact architecture is going to look like. So you're not going to get a piece of paper that says, here it is, deploy. You're going to get a guidance element that says, here are the rules for deployment. And based upon your configuration, the services you want, let's say an Exchange mailbox can be configured in a number of ways. Here's the architecture of the farm that results. And then we have invested in a concept called Cloud Pak. I have to correct this, it's now Cloud Blank Pak with a CK. It used to be called the Platform Alignment Kit, but the legal guys told us it needs to be called Cloud Blank Pack. I just didn't update it. And the idea is that you use these two to effectively deploy the farm onto the private cloud and integrate into the systems management environment. And at this point in time, the PLA is absolutely independent of virtual deployment, physical deployment, private cloud deployment, IIS in the cloud. It doesn't care. It simply is a rule set of how you configure the various workloads called Exchange SharePoint Link that is derived from the service templates of Office 365. So it's not the same, but we're deriving the architecture and the constraints from our friends in Office 365. So they effectively have a service model that you can look into, and that service model is then replicated against the PLA. So it doesn't matter how you deploy it, physical, virtual, Windows Azure IIS, to a degree AWIS, the PLA works. The Cloud Pack is effectively an instantiation of that reference architecture, plus the integration into System Center. And there we are not independent, meaning we will not support Tivoli or other things. You can replicate the same idea, of course, because IBM has patterns and other things as well, but we only will build as services the System Center pieces and not build anything else. And effectively drive down the workload onto the private cloud in a defined and System Center automated fashion. The IIS PLA and the data center management PLAs are effectively overlays of a concept called Fast Track. How many of you know about Fast Track? Either you're sleeping or you don't know, which is a bad thing. And it's my or our fault. The Fast Track environment is effectively a pre-designed reference model for Windows Server deployed in the private cloud. And it has three models: non-convergent hardware, so you have separate network, compute, storage environments; convergent hardware, so where you effectively have a thing like Cisco UCS, Unified Compute Services, which effectively combines the various layers in the hardware layer. And then you have a what we call continuously available pattern, which is effectively a software-based data center, which is based on Windows Server 2012, Hyper-V switch, storage spaces, and so forth, where we assume that the hardware is dumb, blind, and deaf. So these three models are available as Fast Track, and you can get them in small, medium, and large configurations. And the IIS PLA and the Data Center Management PLA effectively walk you through decision trees of what to do. Why should you go non-convergent versus convergent? What are the decisions and the consequences? When you go continuously available, what does that mean today? What are the support statements you have to get from your hardware vendor and so forth? Software vendor, sorry. And then we layer the application packs on top of that PLA-based infrastructure. So the assumption we make, but not hard, is that the environment is virtualized and is a private cloud-like environment with respective automation that you can utilize. It's late. So what is a product line architecture? It's a prescriptive environment. It's easy to implement because a lot of the decisions are taken away from you. That also means that a lot of freedom is taken away from you. You will do things this way, then you can effectively deploy this automagically. Cloud aligned, effectively what we've done is we've taken the service descriptions from Office 365 in this case, and took them into what's called the Solution Alignment Workshop. And based upon the Solution Alignment Workshop, we will configure the various artifacts of the product. An artifact, for example, like a mailbox. A mailbox that has a certain set of requirements, like how many messages per day, how many attachments will you have? Will you have Android devices or other mobile devices that access this mailbox? And then how many of those? Do you need DRM email, et cetera, et cetera? Do you need archiving? So there's a whole bunch of questions that are coming along, and based upon those questions, the farm architecture actually changes. And the deployment model varies, and that's why it's not a hard-coded reference architecture, but a product line architecture, because it is flexible. How did we get there? 2 dimensions. One is GFS stands for our Global Foundation Services people, the people that run our data centers, which by now I have no idea how many servers we are running, but it's a heck of a lot. And our public cloud data centers is really our Office 365 guys. So we have spent a lot of time with them and really boiled down what they have learned into these PLA rules. And we're trying to put it all together into this guidance. So the product line architectures in the first degree are only guidance, pieces of paper. That's the first deliverable that we can give you. So if you are a VMware shop and you have no interest in System Center and so forth, the PLA is an artifact that works just fine on VMware. But it's just paper, and that's where it is at this point. Decreased implementation support costs. If you stick to the PLA, you don't customize, our support people will automatically configure this or call this configuration supported. I assume that you have all a Premier contract. If you don't, it's highly recommended. And those guys will run on a regular basis a thing called a RAP, which is a rapid assessment program, where you effectively get a health check against your product deployment. If it's Exchange, Active Directory, SQL Server, doesn't really matter. And the PLA and the health check are one of the same rule set. So when you use the PLA as is, you are automatically healthy, meaning the support guys will not come back with a thing that says, here are the 2,500 things you ought to change in order to go back to supportable configuration. A PLA is automatically supportable. Cloud-enabled, cloud-ready means that if you follow the PLA, for example, a mailbox will be movable between Office 365 and Exchange on-premise. There is no configuration difference. You can just move it. If that's a desire of yours, different story. But a lot of customers have told us that they really want to be able to take a SharePoint site and move that between on-premise and public cloud because of scalability, integration with external networks, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's one of the goals that we have put here. Decreased upgrade cost and complexity. Again, since it's Office 365 aligned, we also follow the same constraints. In certain environments like SharePoint, you will have to use the new SharePoint model, the new application model, in order to get upgradability. Because a lot of times when you deploy SharePoint custom code, it's hard to upgrade that stuff. And therefore, we are pushing you onto the Office 365 constraints to drive upgradability at a much lower cost. Because custom code, if it's in ERP, CRM, or in SharePoint, is just hard to upgrade because we have to be careful with side effects and other things. And then what we are trying to do is decrease the number of unsupported or scary deployments. Sometimes when we go into data centers or talk to customers saying, wow, you did this? Man, we didn't know it could be done. So sometimes that's very impressive and eye-opening. Sometimes it's very, very scary. And so we're trying to put this into a more supportable box without necessarily losing all the ingenuity that we have seen our customers doing, but push the ingenuity higher up into the application stack rather than into the infrastructure stack. So blah, blah, blah. I mean, you can read this as much as I can. The idea is to really drive down the costs of the deployment and push the private cloud principles as much as feasible into the existing server applications. One key principle that is part, or two, that I want to talk about, that is part of the Microsoft PLAs is A, resource independence. Meaning, if you talk to an Exchange person today, let's bash those guys, they will actually tell you that you should deploy physical and you should use direct attached storage. There's lots of historical reasons for that, but those reasons are historical and not really up to date anymore. So the PLA actually makes no assumption about if it's physical, virtual, whatever, and it also makes no assumptions about storage. The only thing it says, you shall give me these kind of performance requirements on the CPU side. You shall give me this network quality of service, and this is the storage I/O that you should guarantee to me. If you do those three things, I'm deployable on anywhere you want. And that's something that is part of this rule set that I've talked about before, where you get this resource independence. And if you find a Microsoft consultant that still wants to deploy physical and DAS, send them to me and we will educate that person. If you are a Microsoft consultant, you can come right after the session and we have a chat. But that's really important. The other piece I mentioned before is that when you talk about elasticity, most people assume that magic happens and the application environment goes up and down like an accordion. That's okay for certain application types where you have that kind of flexibility. But if you look at an environment like Exchange or you look at an environment like SharePoint, A, they have not been designed for that kind of thing. And B, they actually are more often than not fairly constantly in use. There's not necessarily huge fluctuation. There is fluctuation, but not necessarily huge in terms of what's going on. The other piece, elasticity, is actually often oversubscribed, meaning people think that from 1 minute to the next you would remove virtual machines or resources, take them away, give them to somebody else. You guys know that in reality, even assigning a VM, spinning it up, putting it into an NRB, put it into the cluster, blah, 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 takes time. It might be 5 minutes, might be 45 minutes, depending on the complexity of the app. It just makes no sense to do this on a continuous basis just when something happens. Think about more block-wide association. So one of the things we've put into the PLAs is a scale unit-based design. So a scale unit is something that cloud people talk a lot about, or at least they used to. I don't know if they still do, because now it's all magic. And it comes from our friends in Hotmail. At least that's where I know it from. Most likely it got stolen somewhere else before. But when you're Hotmail, it's 1995, you just started webmail. Nobody knows what it is. Everybody's still struggling with mail in the first place. So how are you going to scale your webmail environment? Whatever you do is going to be wrong. If you buy too big of an environment, you don't have the money. And if you buy too small, and you're successful, you can't grow physical hardware fast enough and re-architect your deployment. What do you do? So these guys came up with this idea of saying, instead of managing to an ultimate capacity of X, because X is unknown, you actually turn around and saying, hey, I'm going to provide capacity for Y, and then I can grow in Y pieces. So in the case of Exchange, for example, I think we did 10,000 users. So the design we have is for 10,000 users, and it will go and say for 10,000 users with this configuration, you need blah, this many servers, this much storage, and so forth. And you need another 10,000? Okay, let's add another 10,000. And we do the same thing for SharePoint and for Link, and we're also working on CRM and AX in the Dynamics world to build that kind of scale-based or scale unit-based deployment. So those are two key pieces. When you link about elasticity, elasticity is really nice. If you look at Exchange, for example, deployment in enterprise does take time. And so allocating an environment that is capable of serving 500,000 mailboxes, but you only have 5,000 per month that you can bring on, takes a long time to get to 500,000 users. And elasticity in this case would allow you to say, I can support 10,000, so I'm safe for 2 months, and can I do another 10,000 and. And so the 500,000 will eventually be reached, but it takes a long time to get there. Same with SharePoint or ERP deployments. So the scale unit-based approach is very enterprise-friendly, green, resource-effective, and so forth. So how does it fit into the overall pattern? So Office 365 is what we call standardized. You get what you get. You can extend it using the application models, but at the end of the day, the service models are what we describe. And the way we evolve the service model is through the community of Office 365 users presenting consistent requests. If one customer asks for it, it's a wish. If 75% of the Office 365 customers ask for it, it's a feature request that we will consider. And so the Office guys are immune to change requests. They don't do that kind of thing. So you have to effectively say, here's what I need. For example, BlackBerry support was one of the early things where the community got together and worked with Microsoft and saying, we need BlackBerry support, and we implemented it. But you couldn't have had a single customer saying, here's $1 million, please, Microsoft, do that. We are not an outsourcer, we are a cloud sourcer. So that's what this standardized means. The PLA designs are structured and supported out of the box. So they're derived from Office 365, but customized and implementable on enterprise scale. Because Office 365 is designed around 150 million users is currently their target footprint that they're looking at. Then on-premise recommended practices, those won't go away. We still will have those, and they are a little bit more lenient than a PLA-based environment. And then you have an on-premise custom design. Again, there are reasons and scenarios where PLAs don't work, at least the PLAs we ship. So there are also there is going to be a guideline of how to develop PLAs yourself. So if you have a custom app that you wrote yourself, .NET, Java, whatever, and you want to put this into a private cloud data center, there will be a blueprint kind of thing of how you develop a PLA, including starting from the service model all the way down to how do you design a farm, scale units, and so forth. Now we got our reference model, our variable architecture that we can deploy. It covers the questions of how do you put the farms together, of what are the tiering models, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it also answers the question, how do you do capacity? What it doesn't do yet is it doesn't really implement it yet. It doesn't really instantiate Exchange or SharePoint or Lync. It just gives you guidance of how to do it. Much more authoritative, but it's still guidance. Now, what we are going to do is effectively say, okay, and here's how you implement this using Windows Server Hyper-V as the reference model for the private cloud layer, meaning the hypervisor layer, and System Center as the automation layer. We are flexible on the hypervisor layer. We assume that the hypervisors that are currently in usage can support certain things. For example, I mentioned that Exchange requires you to provide network quality of service and a certain set of storage IOPS. If you can guarantee those into VMware or Xen, whatever you use, then Exchange is okay. But it's hard because, for example, or some of the existing hypervisors don't have network quality of service support yet. So it's kind of something where Windows Server makes it easier, but it's not impossible to implement on the other side. So what is that? Rationalized guidance, tunable configuration, a standard implementation, and then an implementation on terms of System Center. I don't know if I have a slide. Yeah. So the first version that we're going to ship is focusing primarily on provisioning. The next phase is operations. So how does this work? So using System Center and Windows Server artifacts. The architecture is based upon System Center 2012, SP1, and we're using effectively a combination of three things. We're using System Center Virtual Machine Manager service templates, so to effectively lay out the topology. So when we know what the farm architecture looks like, we use the VMM system to create effectively the topology, integrate the virtual machines into the network load balancer, and so forth. And we are not using VMM for application configuration. SharePoint, Exchange, Lync are way too complex for that current model as it is currently implemented. And the bigger problem is that when you touch an application configuration element, which you will do frequently, you rev the service template. So you have a lot of versions of service templates, around. And so we decided not to use VMM templates for app configuration. So we use it to deploy the topology and configure the load balancer, storage, all this other good stuff that VMM does. And then we run a series of System Center orchestrations and PowerShell scripts to effectively configure the application and really drive, okay, how do you, for Exchange, you need to configure it into AD first, and so forth. For SharePoint, you have to have SQL Server up and running before you can start the SharePoint guys. Oh, these kind of things you can do in parallel. So we have a combination of orchestration and PowerShell that effectively drives against the deployed topology. So the first thing is deploy the topology using VMM, and then configure the app using a combination of orchestration and PowerShell. And again, the goal is to, reduce the time to deployment and the time to supportable configuration. Because the rules that are in the tool set for PLAs are actually implemented and instantiated in the Cloud Pak. So the Cloud Pak knows what the rules are and enforces it. And we're looking at fancy things like understanding that this resource pool or host group is actually capable of hosting Exchange. This one is actually capable of hosting VDI because there is a certain set of requirements that we see for VDI and so forth, but those are fancy things that don't necessarily matter at this point. But the idea is to drive it completely automated based upon self-service integration. The self-service right now is based upon a custom portal that we developed as MCS, but we're going to move to Katal when the time is right. So I hope you have heard about Katal as the self-service management environment for Windows Server, what is it called? The Service Provider Foundation today, and it's going to be part of Windows Server Blue proper, or Windows Server 2012 R2. Man, it's like this long name again. Blue sounds so much nicer. Where we effectively will swap our MCS private self-service portal out with the Katal implementation going forward. But the idea is very simple. You deploy the Cloud Pak into System Center. You say, I want another SharePoint farm, and I want it to be this way, and boom, we automatically deploy. And the next phases after deployment will be operations. So we are going to customize the shipping management packs, because the management packs are a superset of all configurable and observable items. And we are using the premier support experience of what really matters to give you an optimized management pack as part of the Cloud Pak. And we will also do a couple of other things based upon an integration framework that we have defined for private cloud. And again, effectively taking this and then deploy it. At this point in time, all of what I've talked about is MCS proprietary, meaning you have to get a warm buddy with a Microsoft Consulting Services business card involved to get access to this stuff. We are working on ways with the Windows Server Group to give you this stuff without MCS support, but at this point in time, it's MCS based, so you have to talk to me or my colleagues to effectively get there. It has benefits too, because you get access to not only warm buddies, but also knowledge. And we will continue updating these service packs. So giving you the initial service pack is easy, or Cloud Pak, sorry. That will be easy. I can put it on a what is it called, the gallery site for VMM, and off you go. But what happens if we learn something? What happens if it breaks? You want a supportable model, and so we are offering a supportable model as well as part of a service engagement. So you effectively sign up for a premier agreement for a Cloud Pak, and you will get updates and so forth from Microsoft services. Again, currently I'm looking at that as temporary. Temporary could be quite some time, because I do believe that over time it needs to be part of the product strategy, but at this point in time it isn't, so I'm kind of limited to what I can do. Now, I talked about Cloud Paks and PLAs not in the abstract necessarily, but at the end of the day, let's walk through a SharePoint Cloud Pak and talk a little bit what's in there. So the goal is to enable rapid development, drive the application. So you will see two variations of the service model. One is for app development, and the other one is for team collaboration. And we are going to implement the rest of the Office 365 services, e-discovery, search, et cetera, as part of the Cloud Pak elements. Putting security and governance into the system so you don't have to think about this anymore. And again, I'm looking at the next wave to introduce the Windows desired configuration, state configuration, which I don't know if you have seen of Windows Blue. They have a new way of looking at configuration and state, and they will enforce it for you. And so we are going to look at PLAs and Cloud Paks in Blue to think about state configuration, and also looking at a cloud service that I have in terms of Microsoft services, where the wrap that I mentioned before is now available as a service. And the wrap effectively is a set of rules that we enforce, or at least we write a report about. With this one, I can effectively take all this and encode it into the desired state configuration module and check your configuration all the time. Are you still healthy? Doesn't mean that you are not running, but we will at least tell you what the difference is between what we believe proven practices and what you are currently running. And then you can make the decision, do I want to fix it or not? Because you might have a very good reason why you do that. And again, the goal is to help you with the SharePoint deployment for developers and the other scenarios, and really drive the configuration, the automation, the deployment, so that when you go and say, I would like you build SharePoint apps, you don't have to worry about the deployment of the servers and so forth. It is actually all taken care of it for you. And then enterprise scale is commoditized cost. I don't know what the cost point really is right now, but it's going to be a fixed price. So when you say, I'm going to go with a PLA and I'm going to wanting to use a Cloud Pak, we will actually say to you, here it is, 50K, 100K, I don't know what the exact number is, but you will be able to buy that at a fixed price, and you don't have to worry about BCDR, all these other things. They're built into the system. So disaster recovery, business continuity, and so forth, for SharePoint Exchange link, done. Those systems, those rules are effectively out there. And so these are the three scenarios that we're currently pushing for Cloud Paks, because these are the three that we have heard most consistently. So what is it that's in there for product line architecture? The solution of alignment workshop that I mentioned before. Any of you using Office 365 yet? So a solution alignment workshop is something that we do for every Office 365 deployment, where we are looking at the services that Office 365 provides and your requirements. And we're trying to make sure that the Office 365 solution actually meets those requirements. That was very important in the older days when we didn't have a custom application development model that works on Office 365. But it's still very useful because then you can see who's the yellow egg and who's the green egg, and do I fit into the PLA environment, or do I have to take the PLA and customize it because I have a certain set of things that are not supported. We will give you an infrastructure design and a configuration based upon the PLAs, going all the way from the hardware if you want us to. We recommend you looking at things like Fast Track, which in the original version of Fast Track only OEMs could do, so Dell, HP, and all these other guys. But now with Fast Track 3, we are effectively making that guidance available as pieces of paper. So you can still get it from the OEMs pre-built, but you can also get it as pieces of paper that effectively allow you to look at the resource architecture and say, yep, I like the convergent offering, and here's how I would like to configure it. And then you can use the Fast Track as a fast track, for reference architecture and getting things done quickly. Because a lot of time and effort has been put into Fast Track to really build a modern resource architecture, and a lot of people that spend doing nothing else but that. Doesn't mean that you can't do it, but it's a lot of time and material and work that actually is available to you pretty much for free. I don't know, Tom, are we shipping the Fast Track guidance somewhere on MSDN or TechEd?
Fast Track 3.
Yeah.
That's still under consideration.
Okay. So you should lobby Tom in the back for getting that.
We will be publishing the PLA very, very soon.
Yeah. So the idea is we will ship these things for you. You can use them to kickstart your private cloud deployment, or you can buy a fast track from Dell, et cetera, the usual suspects, which effectively gives you this hardware pattern implemented, and you just tune it. Then the Cloud Pak portal, provisioning runbooks, and what we call an enhanced service template. There's a couple of special things that we're doing as Microsoft Services with the service templates, which effectively allow us to deploy complex services like SharePoint Exchange using a lot of the facilities that VMM provides, but not necessarily completely relying on the VMM service templates. I don't know if anybody have heard about service templates or used them. Somebody has at least heard about them. That's good, because that's another thing we hide really well. So VMM service templates are effectively a way for you to describe your service in a graphical form, multi-tier, multi-instance, and it effectively deploys virtual machines into the, or on top of the fabric. It integrates with a number of load balancers and integrates with a number of storage environments for automatic storage provisioning. So the service templates are really, really useful for topology management is what I call it. And there are discussions underway to make Windows Server, System Center, and Windows Azure service templates as much aligned as that is possible. Again, I can't give you any details, but stay tuned. That is something that's under consideration so that if you design a service template for Windows Server, you can use it on Azure and vice versa. Today that wouldn't work, but again, we are working on it. And then we're also going to give you operational runtime scripts. Part of these runbooks, another piece that we're shipping as part of services is an architecture for runbooks. Because when you look at runbooks, every time I talk with anybody over in the product engineering team is, yeah, we're going to have a community of runbook people and developers that build runbooks. Everybody know what a runbook is, I assume, so operational scripts. And by the way, first of all, if you are going to use runbooks, I hope you have your application lifecycle management strategy under control, meaning source code control and all these other things, because those runbooks are software. And if you are an operations person and you just write scripts, you still have to go through the source control and all this other good stuff. So if you are an ops guy that writes scripts, listen to Brian Harry, our technical fellow for Visual Studio Team Foundation, to really see how to manage software. Even if you only use parts of it, it's really important. It is software and you should manage it like that. But there's also an architecture that's required. Because if everybody writes runbooks without principles, guidance, architecture, it's not going to work. Meaning they will work, but you can't have a community of runbooks. And so we just released a runbook architecture document as part of services of how you can write effectively runbooks that work together. There's an architecture, there's a model behind it to say, we assume that there's machine tasks, there's app tasks, and then there will be tier tasks and so forth. And we assume that you will have clear boundaries in that runbook depending on what that runbook is supposed to do. And they will talk about what you should put in orchestrations and what you should put in PowerShell. Because frankly, you can do anything in PowerShell you want. But System Center orchestration has a couple of nice things that are very useful in operational environment, and PowerShell is good at other things. And combining the two is really the trick. How does this now work end to end? So, review the PLA. In this case, at this point in time, you have to engage one of my friends, meaning the Microsoft Consulting guys. They will do a solution alignment workshop with you, and effectively we will review the PLA. Does it work for you? How much doesn't work for you? How would we go and implement the pieces that don't work for you, and so forth. This reading the PCIF RA, the PCIF is something that we developed as part of the lack of guidance from the engineering team. PCIF stands for Private Cloud Integration Framework. That's where the PAC came from, the Platform Alignment Kit, to say, hey, you need to think about provisioning, you need to think about operations, you need to think about self-service, you need to think about these 7 things. And here is the things you got to do in each of these areas. So it's effectively a model of how you develop cloud packs and the PLAs. And so the PCIF is part of the engagement, and we will leave it behind so that if you wanted to build your own, we would give you the reference model of how you do that. Develop cloud pack functional specs, that's how we do it. So you don't have to do it, but I wanted to leave that in because I believe that you have a lot of server applications running in your data centers that could benefit from this kind of integration and standardization. The Cloud Pak artifacts, currently we're only building 4. SCVMM service templates for topology management, orchestrations and PowerShell scripts as runbooks, and we are building custom SCOM System Center Operations Management Pack, the management pack environments. Those 4 artifacts, plus currently the custom self-service portal, which will move to Catal when that is ready. And then build engagement content, that's effectively a Microsoft Services thing where we help our sellers and other things, so you don't have to worry about that. But once that is all done, you effectively are able to deploy onto your private cloud environment without you having to really know what this hardware architecture looks like. Normally, when you engage a SharePoint person or an Exchange guy, they will say, what does my server hardware look like? In this case, you don't have to do that anymore. You can truly build a private cloud as long as it meets the requirements, meaning performance, isolation, and so forth. We don't care. If it's running in the AWS IaaS layer, as long as it meets the performance, fine. AWS, by the way, is not supported today, but that's a different discussion. And I'm sure that's going to change. But this stuff here doesn't care. And you can use System Center also against the IaaS environments of public clouds. Today it's a little bit limited, but over time that will get much, much better, as I'm sure we will share with you either here or at Build and going forward. So the end of the day is you're getting a bunch of specifications that you then encode and deploy against a standardized hardware artifact or system. You're going to get these slides, and there are 2 data sheets that I've added into the slide deck. The version that might get published has them at the very end, not the middle end, as we are here. But it is something that will give you some more details about what we're talking about. And it also gives you kind of an address. If you are concretely interested in saying, I want one of those now, grab me afterwards and we can talk about how we can do that. And again, as I said, temporarily we are holding this as Microsoft Services IP and approaches, but we are looking at ways of giving it to the product teams if they support it. Because I don't want it to just give it to them and then they put it up onto a gallery of some sort and then it kind of stays there. I really want a support model that we can, both of us effectively use in order to use the cloud packs and then continue to gain benefits from that stuff. So again, pushing it out there is easy, supporting it is the hard one. Today, that's why I'm doing the private cloud services model at this point rather than a product model. Again, it's a very deliberate decision because we hear every time we do stuff like that, we ship something into a gallery, customer says, well, it doesn't work. Well, but we told you it's as is. No, it doesn't work. Support it. And, oh, by the way, do you have a new one? How do I get that new one? And how do I upgrade? All of these things always come up whenever we ship something as is. It never works for us for some reason. And so that's why I'm holding this stuff as Microsoft Services IP with a services engagement model rather than a product engagement model. So, blah, blah, blah. So we bribe you to give us evaluations. I hope that you're going to evaluate the session and share your thoughts. And not just because we bribe you. It should be an Xbox One. That would be cool, but apparently that's not available yet. And so with that, I'm done with my content. And this time I actually have time for Q&A. although I'm not sure you guys are up for it, because it's dinner time and all these other things. But in any case, I want to thank you for listening at that late hour, because it is late. I'm sure you guys were here since 7:30, 8, something like that. And so I appreciate your patience, and I hope this made a little bit of sense. Thank you very much. And again, if you want to ask questions on the mics, that's cool. Otherwise, I'll stay around. If you want private questions, that's also cool. Excuse me? Yep. That works from there? Wow. Okay. Thank you very much. Have a great